Hi, Liz.
Hi.
How are you?
I need to put my headphones on.
Thanks so much for joining the webinar.
Sorry.
Oh yeah, no worries. Can you hear me okay?
So, can I hear you?
Yeah.
I can't hear you.
Oh no, okay.
I've been on my headphones all day.
Nick says he can hear both of us. So it might be your earbuds. Thanks, Nick. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for, I see that we've got a few participants already on the webinar. We're a few minutes before the top of the hour, so I think I'm just gonna wait a few minutes and we'll try to get started as soon as possible, or not as soon as possible, but as on time as possible. And the webinar is gonna be recorded, so if you have colleagues or folks who are on vacation. I know a lot of folks are out of the office right now, but we'll send around the recording so that they can also tune in. So I'll just hold tight, and if folks want to grab their extra cup of coffee or take a quick break, stretch break before we get started, feel free to do that, and we'll get started in the next 2 minutes or so. And Liz, you're okay on audio now that you can hear better without the earbuds?
I've been on my headphones all day. I think they died.
Oh, okay, that sounds great. All right, I'm going to mute myself and we will start here momentarily. Hi, Dorothy.
Hey, Steph. Sorry.
Hey, thanks for joining. Okay, it sounds like your audio sounds great. I know you're like muting / rearranging. We're just going to start in like a few minutes just to give folks a chance to hop on, some additional folks to hop on, but we'll try to start on time. Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. I think we've got a pretty small group today, but that'll be nice just because I think it'll give us a little bit of an opportunity to have a more more in-depth discussion if we want to around commitment ideas that you all might have towards the latter half of our webinar. And for folks who just hopped on, I just wanted to mention we're going to be recording the webinar so that we can share this out and make it available to other individuals who wanted to join, but maybe they're out of the office or just couldn't make it work with their schedule. Let me go ahead and get started. I am going to share my screen now. Okay. So thanks everyone for joining. My name is Steph Santoso. I'm the Director of Maker Initiatives for Citizen Schools Maker and Mentors Network. And you're joining this webinar, which is really focused on Make for All's national call for commitments in support of maker-centered learning, and really learning more about how to develop commitments and use commitments to help grow what you're doing around maker-centered learning in your community. Just a little bit of background, Makers and Mentors Network is an initiative of the national nonprofit Citizen Schools. And at Citizen Schools, we're really focused on growing what communities around the country are doing around maker-centered learning and STEM mentorship. And we do that in three different ways, or three different models in the Maker and Mentors Network initiative. So the first one is through our community of practice. We work directly with 21 different communities across the country. This map kind of shows you a little bit of a footprint of the communities where we're working in through the Makers and Mentors Network. Each of those members of the community of practice have a lead institution or organization. So that could be a local museum, working with a nonprofit education organization. In some cases, it's working through efforts that connect back to the K-12 school district. And we work with those organizations to help them deepen what they're doing around maker-centered learning and STEM mentorship based on their needs. And we host biannual convenings that bring folks together to talk about best practices and challenges that they can work on addressing together. And then the second model that I'll be spending more time talking about today is Make for All, where we're really leveraging the commitments model to grow what communities are doing around the country, and not just help them to sustain the maker-centered learning efforts that they've already put into place, but really push them to level up, and also to help help communities that and organizations that are really focused on growing maker-centered learning to develop new partnerships with other stakeholders that they previously may not have had a chance to collaborate with. And then the third model that we're working through is the Maker Fellows program. And that's a new program that we've just launched this year, where we're placing talented individuals throughout the country. And this first cohort, we have 26 fellows in 20 communities where they're working at host sites such as community colleges, historically Black colleges and universities, and community maker spaces to really advance equity and access around maker-centered learning. Just a little overview for what we're going to be covering in this session. I'm going to talk real briefly about the commitments model and what it looks like and why it's important. We'll talk a little bit about what a commitment actually is, how it's structured, and how it can be really helpful for the work that you're currently doing around maker education. And then we'll talk more specifically about the opportunity to participate in the Make for All initiative by creating your own commitment. We'll cover a few examples that show how participating in Make for All can be helpful to your organization and your community. And then we're going to round things out by hearing from a commitment maker, Liz Gallo, who's the CEO and founder of WhyMaker, and Dorothy Jones-Davis, who is a member of the Make for All Advisory Council and is also the executive director of Nation of Makers. So just a little bit about the commitments model. The model itself is not something that's specific to the Make for All initiative, or is not something that Citizen Schools developed, but it's actually a model that's been used by a number of different organizations and institutions to actually bring together leaders and different stakeholders to coalesce around a particular topic area and try to gather actionable support around that particular topic or particular issue. One institution or one initiative that's used the commitments model for a number of years is the Clinton Global Initiative. They've rallied together global leaders at a pretty high level to make commitments on everything related to global climate change and more specific issues around public health to education related topics as well. And then the first time I had a chance to work with the commitments model directly was during the Obama administration, when I was working with a team there to help develop President Obama's initiative to support the maker movement. And that was through his Nation of Makers initiative, where the White House actually and the president launched a call to action and a call for commitments in support of making. And that was broader than education, that was broader than maker-centered learning, but it definitely included maker education and maker-centered learning. That was one of the main areas, in addition to a focus on supporting makers as it related to fostering entrepreneurship, community-based problem solving, and local and advanced manufacturing. So a few examples of commitments that came out of that call included, we worked with local government leaders and policymakers, and we had 100 mayors sign on to the Mayor's Maker Challenge, which was really mayors committing to take actionable steps to support makers and maker education in their communities. So doing things like identifying underutilized buildings or structures and making it easier for makers to be able to create maker spaces, physical spaces, or for them to be able to leverage those spaces for projects that the maker community would want to work on. So that's an example. We also worked with federal agencies. So they were another stakeholder group that we worked with. And the Department of Education launched a competition called the CTE Makeover Challenge. And that was really focused on helping to support high schools that wanted to either convert unused space or old space on their campuses, or create new space for a maker space or a fab lab on their campuses. And that particular competition had funding that was tied to it, as well as support from different partners, which included things like technology or equipment or technical support. And I want to transition to talking about a few examples of commitments that came out from our call for commitments last year, just so you can kind of see the breadth of the commitments that are made. And to also note that commitments can vary in terms of the size and the scope, and really what we're talking about, and I'll get into a little bit more detail later about what exactly a commitment is, but wanted to give you a few examples that you'll start to see that commitments are really they're really supposed to be like the right size for the community or the organization that's making them. So you'll see that some commitments have a really broad reach, where they're reaching a larger number of students, and others are small because they may be earlier on in the process of creating an initiative, which is totally fine. The goal is really just to encourage organizations to do more and to be ambitious but realistic in what they're trying to accomplish. So in this particular commitment, this is from a college. This is from the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana, and specifically their Illinois Maker Lab, which is their maker space that's within their College of Business. So they actually teamed up with their School of Design to create an interdisciplinary course. And really what they were trying to do here was to create more opportunities on campus for students to engage in the kind of making that connects them back to real world problem solving and social impact. And so this was specifically a course to help students be able to work with individuals who were differently abled, and to be able to co-design solutions focused on assistive technologies. And so in this case, this was an initial pilot of a course, and so their reach is somewhat on the smaller side because this is a brand new initiative, but is a very valuable and a very worthy commitment, specifically for the work that they're trying to do in seeding more opportunities for students to engage in problem solving on campus. The second commitment is from a nonprofit called Dreams, Imaginations, and Gifts, or DIG. And they're based in rural South Carolina in the Allendale area. And so this is from an education nonprofit that's working in a pretty under-resourced area, in a pretty rural area of South Carolina. And so their commitment was really around growing what they're already doing. So as opposed to the previous commitment, which was creating something brand new, a brand new course, a commitment can also be about expanding what you're doing to reach more students or to deepen the work that you're doing. And so in this case, they wanted to reach an additional 150 students by leveraging the existing relationships they already have within the public school districts there. And then they actually host an annual free STEM festival that has in which maker-centered learning and maker education is a really core part of that experience. And they in the past have reached a couple thousand students and families, and so they set a goal of reaching more than 4,000. So really trying to continue to grow the number of youth and families that they serve with the festival every year. And then this third example is from a corporate commitment maker. So Genentech, which is a pharmaceutical company, they're global, very large. They have an interest in creating more hands-on learning opportunities for students to engage in biotechnology, because that's something that's not provided on a wider scale at the high school level. And so they have been working with teachers to design something that would be very hands-on, that would introduce students to biotechnology, but in a way that really connects them back to real-world applications. And so this is a little bit of a different kind of a commitment, because this is more around curriculum development and maker education experience. And we didn't have as many corporate commitment makers last year, but we thought that this commitment was a really thoughtful one, especially because they've taken a really co-design approach to creating the first iteration of this curriculum with high school teachers and their students. And so just to summarize, you probably already, just by reading through and listening into the descriptions of the commitments, you have a sense of what a commitment is, but they really boil down to being new, specific, and measurable actions, which are developed and implemented through partnerships and initiatives in support of a particular issue. And in this case, we're talking specifically about maker-centered learning. When you look at a commitment, you could also think of it as a type of goal. But the difference between a goal and a commitment is that goals aren't always as action-oriented and specific, and really a commitment is supposed to be designed in a way where you can already see the steps that you need to take and the organizations or the people that you need to partner with to accomplish that commitment. And if you look at the structure of a commitment, this is just using that commitment from DIG as an example. This is a really good example of a commitment, because you can see the elements that make it new and measurable. There are very specific metrics attached to the number of students that you're reaching, or in some cases, depending on the commitment, it might be around educators or families that you want to reach, or schools that you want to work with. And then it's measurable in the sense of you are able to understand when you've made progress on your commitment, how much further you need to go to make your commitment a reality. I also want to flag that a commitment is just that. It doesn't necessarily mean that you've already accomplished the commitment when you've made it. It's supposed to be ambitious, but realistic, as I had mentioned before. So the idea is that you're trying to do something that you will accomplish into the future. So commitments generally can be on a year timeline. In some cases, last year we had commitment makers that made their commitments as far up until the 3-year timeline if they wanted to make a longer term commitment. And then the question is always super logical, like how can commitments help you get work done? Because and why would you need to make a commitment in support of maker-centered learning through Make for All, as opposed to just like designing your own commitment internally in your organization? You can certainly do that, but there's a few reasons why making a commitment is helpful. The first is that it really can create this opportunity for you to work with other stakeholders or potential partners in your community that you might not have otherwise. And I have an example of that later down the line that we'll talk about, but there might be an organization or institution that you've been wanting to reach out to for a while that you think would be really interested in supporting your work, or you really want to partner with them, but you haven't had a reason to reach out to them. Well, responding to this national call for commitments is a really great reason. The second is really around the fact that this whole process of making commitments in terms of like designing to developing it, going through that process can help you identify challenges that you need to address, but can also help you discover best practices that you might want to take and scale in your own community. So as you're participating in this webinar or participating in some of our future Make for All commitment office hours, and you're connecting with other commitment makers, that's really an opportunity for you to also network and build out the ecosystem of organizations that are all really focused on growing maker-centered learning together. And then the third is that the National Call for Commitment really showcases and celebrates the depth and the breadth of the work being done across maker-centered learning. So we're doing this National Call for Commitments, and then what we did last year and what we will do again this year is that we will announce the commitments in a large way, in the sense of in a national, using a national platform. And so, you know, the work that you are doing in your organizations may be celebrated right now within your community, which is super valuable, but it's also valuable in a different way to be able to have that work showcase nationally. And that can lead to other collaborations potentially, to organizations that may want to support your work that may not have heard of it before. Those are some of just a few of the kind of really tangible benefits of being part of a national initiative and a national call for commitments. So I spoke about Make for All and really just wanted to spend some time reinforcing and describing why Make for All exists and why we think it's so important to continue to focus on broadening access to maker-centered learning. So maker-centered learning as an approach to education really empowers students to develop their own agency and enables them to understand how they can have a positive impact on the world around them. And I think even before everything that's happened this year around COVID-19 and systemic racism, there were plenty of problems and issues that students face in their own communities, but that is ever more the case now. And so we've already seen some really powerful examples of students already standing up in their communities and being really proactive in helping their communities in what has been a very tough year. But we also want to continue to communicate and show them and create opportunities for them to solve problems that they care about and really have a front seat in their own personal education by showing them that they don't have to wait until they graduate from a particular school level or grade to be able to make change. And maker-centered learning certainly can do that in a really powerful way. Through making, students are also able to develop the critical thinking and problem-solving skills and have that ability and opportunity to cultivate their creativity and curiosity in ways that are really focused on interdisciplinary experiences that connect them to STEM, but also arts and design, and are really relevant to the way that people navigate in the world, right? When we are living our everyday lives and we're solving problems or challenges that come up, we don't only use science or don't only use math. We normally use science and math and design and art in combination with each other in some way. And so maker-centered learning is really an opportunity to help students develop those skills. And then finally, we really need an all hands on deck effort to broaden access to these experiences. There are some really amazing examples of maker-centered learning around the country, both at the K-12 level and post-secondary and higher ed levels. But we are also really aware that there's a huge disconnect and a lack of access to these experiences in a lot of communities, particularly in communities of color and in under-resourced communities as well. This is just, this is a slide that highlights our really amazing Make for All Advisory Council. And you can see that this is a group of nonprofit education organizations, community-based organizations, and funders who are really committed to growing maker-centered learning in really different ways. And the Make for All Advisory Council has, from the very beginning, helped to shape the focus of the call for commitments, and also the ways that we're working with commitment makers after they make their commitments to support them. That's also a part of the Make for All initiative, is that once you make a commitment or once you design and make a commitment, that's not the end. The end goal is the ultimate goal is that you are able to, with support from the Make for All team, find the partners and the resources that you need to actually make that commitment a reality, and then to continue to grow that commitment and grow the work that you're doing. And so this advisory council has been really critical in helping us to really shape what the initiative looks like and what the call for commitments looks like year upon year. Last year, we had a really successful call for commitments. This is just a quick snapshot of what we announced. We had more than 50 commitments representing 295 organizations and partners, and 149 communities across the U.S. were represented or participated. And what that actually looks like in terms of student reach is that through 2021, because some of the commitments are 3-year commitments or close to 3-year commitments, the commitments collectively will serve over 768,000 students. And you can find more information about the commitments in detail, like the individual commitments, at our commitments catalog or through our commitments catalog, which is available at makersandmentors.org /make for all. So I wanted to highlight 2 examples of how the Make for All initiative can be valuable in different ways, and how making a commitment and that process, even just the process of going through designing a commitment or thinking about what your commitment could be, can be really valuable. So some of you may have heard of the UTeach program, which actually focuses on, it's a national program that's based in various college campuses across the US. And UTeach is really focused on growing the number of high quality STEM teachers that are working with students across the US. And they really focus on pre-service teachers. So the UTeach Austin program for UTeach actually has developed a Maker micro-credential that members of the UTeach program can actually take. And the idea behind that is to enable pre-service teachers to actually learn the pedagogy and the techniques for maker-centered learning and maker education from the beginning, and for them to be able to then infuse their classrooms with those experiences right from the start, which is really amazing. And Shelley Rodriguez, the director of the program, when I was talking to her, she was interested in developing a commitment, and she had mentioned that she thought a few of the other UTeach campuses were interested in bringing the UTeach Maker program to their campuses. And what she ended up doing was reaching out to the entire UTeach network across the country, and just to see, who would be interested. And she hosted these community calls with the UTeach sites, and then got to learn a little bit more about what their needs are. And it ended up being that 22 sites across the country were interested, which is way more than she had anticipated. And so that was really exciting. So their commitment ended up being that they are going to work together with these 22 other campuses to try to bring, with the goal of bringing the UTeach Maker program, that micro-credentialing program, to those campuses, which could exponentially reach quite a few additional pre-service teachers by 2022. So Shelley talks a lot about how the commitment making process actually allowed her to unearth just the demand for this work. And now they're really focused on building out the support and the resources that they need to actually make this real, so that all 22 of the campuses will be able to bring that micro-credentialing program to their communities. And then the second example I have here is actually our Maker Fellows program. So I mentioned that this is a new program, so it actually came out somewhat directly from the learnings that we had after running the last call for commitment. So when we surveyed the commitment makers from last year, we asked about what their top needs were in terms of helping them to grow the work that they were doing, and in terms of helping to support the commitments that they made. And at the top of the list, no surprise, was funding, but also capacity and direct support. So what we ended up doing was designing the Maker Fellows program, which Citizen Schools has a history of working with the AmeriCorps and VISTA program. We're a grantee of CNCS, the federal agency that oversees AmeriCorps and VISTA programs. And so through the VISTA program, we were actually able to place 26 fellows in 20 communities this year at host sites, which include the community colleges, HBCUs, makerspaces, and nonprofit organizations that I mentioned previously. And so just that process of even hearing about organizations and commitment makers' needs led to the creation of this new program, which we're also hopeful will grow in our second year. And this might be an opportunity for commitment makers who make commitments this year to be able to be part of the next cohort of host sites that will host Maker Fellows in 2021. And so I wanted to just spend a little bit of time talking about this year's themes for our call for commitments, which we spent a lot of time talking about and designing, and are really focused in direct response to the challenges of COVID-19 and systemic racism. And these are not in any particular order, but the themes are maker-centered learning at home, creating experiences for all students to make outside of the classroom or makerspace, regardless of resources available. Problem solving for community resilience, enabling all young people to solve problems in their communities through maker-centered learning. Anti-racism and inclusion, addressing the lack of support for young people of color in maker-centered learning by fostering opportunities and environments that are culturally relevant, inclusive, and equitable. And mentorship, growing all students' interests in making by creating more role models and a network of support and encouragement. And so for this year's National Call for Commitments, we're really excited about commitment makers really focusing on one or more of these themes. And so if you have an idea about an initiative that you're already working on, or something new that falls into one or more of these categories, we'd really love to hear more about it and brainstorm with you on how that could become a commitment this year. And then the question is, how do you make a commitment? So we have an online form where you can submit your commitment idea. So that's at the bit.ly provided here. I'll also send out this information and this deck out to you after the webinar. And the idea there at the Make for All commitment form is that doesn't have to be your final commitment. The idea is to share the commitment idea with our team, and someone from our team will follow up with you to have a conversation about your idea and to kind of fine tune and refine your commitment, and also to help you identify potential partners or supporters that might be helpful to that work. And if you think about who in your network would be interested in working with you on the commitment, or might want to make their own separate commitment, I wanted to, this is just a list of different stakeholders that made commitments last year. So we had makerspaces, companies, colleges, libraries, museums, cities, local or federal agencies, K-12 schools, nonprofit organizations, foundations, and philanthropic entities have either made commitments in support of maker-centered learning through our Make for All call for commitments last year. And as I mentioned before, in previous iterations of other calls for commitments through President Obama's Nation of Makers initiative, there were a number of federal agencies that made commitments in support of maker education. Tips for creating a commitment, just things to keep in mind: be ambitious but also realistic. So finding that balance can be challenging, but you ultimately want to be able to commit to doing something that you think you can do, but also to push yourself and push your community to do more. Think about potential partners and consider stakeholders that you might not already know. So this is really around just thinking outside the box. and maybe even thinking about partners that are strategic but might not necessarily be doing work at the moment in maker-centered learning. And then be as specific as you can so you can measure progress. A big value of a commitment is to be able to keep track of how much you're accomplishing in terms of like how far along you are in making that commitment. And then these are just a list of different kinds of stakeholders in your community that might help fill a need that you've identified around maker-centered learning in your community. And so these are stakeholders that you might want to consider as potential collaborators or partners. Local foundations or regional foundations can actually help in terms of providing not just implementation of a project or a maker-centered learning initiative, but they could also provide support or funding as in terms of a planning grant. So even just to sort of start the process of designing something. If you think about state and local education policymakers, they can be helpful in terms of having a conversation around teacher credentialing and how maker-centered learning could become a more formalized part of teacher credentialing, or having conversations around aligning maker-centered learning with assessment. And then media, I wanted to call out too, because I think a big part of broadening the number of stakeholders who are involved in your community in maker-centered learning is demonstrating why it's important and why it's valuable. And certainly we've seen that the media coverage and the storytelling that the media has done around the maker community's response to COVID-19 has been really powerful for creating a proof point and a case for the role that they can play in terms of innovation and solving community needs. And you can think about the way that media can continue to do that for the work that you're doing around maker education. I want to transition now so that you have a chance to hear from a few folks in the community that have been really active in making commitments and using commitments as a way to grow what they're doing in the work that they have been steadfastly and dedicated to around maker education. So I'm going to turn it over to Liz Gallo, who's founder and CEO of WhyMaker, and Liz was a commitment maker last year and is planning on being a commitment maker this year as well. So Liz, feel free to start, and feel free to share your screen. You should be able to share your screen as well.
Thank you. It says host disabled screen sharing.
Oh no.
So thank you. Yeah, I made a commitment last year. I'm founder and CEO of WhyMaker, and I am super excited to tell you about what happened last year, what happened with COVID, and what happened with our commitment. And then some other really cool stuff that we've been doing with helping more people be makers, even through the chaos of COVID. So I still can't share my screen. Sorry. You're muted.
Sorry, Liz. I'm not exactly sure what's happening. If it's okay, in the interest of time, I will run your slides and then just tell me when you want me to switch to next slide, if that works okay for you.
That's fine. There we go. Don't give away all the goodies.
Sorry.
That's okay. So WhyMaker is a professional development organization with the mission to support educators to be comfortable and confident teaching STEM and maker ed. with the ultimate goal of improving student engagement and a school's success. We believe in a value of transdisciplinary education for all schools and all students, creating a culture of making and building by creating design thinking mindsets and helping students be creative makers. So last year, this was our commitment, that we'd work with 2,000 educators in the 2019-2020 school year to provide maker education professional development opportunities, focused on creating opportunities for 40,000 students across the US to engage in making in and outside of the classroom, and planned on collaborating with schools of education, teacher associations as part of this effort, along with K-12 organizations and schools. So those are some pictures from last summer. Next slide, when we were allowed to be around each other, and it was lovely. So, click, I guess. We did it. We trained over 2,000 educators last school year as part of our commitment. It was so exciting to like put all the numbers together and be like, oh my God, we actually did it. So on the next slide, we can see like the detailed results. We trained 2,046 teachers, so 46 more than our goal. And our commitment was to get in touch with 40,000 students, but we realized really quickly that we were accessing way more students because a lot of times the teachers we're training were like K-5 teachers. So they teach, I don't know, 100, 200 kids, where the original commitment I made was like each teacher teaches 25 kids. But really it was so much more. And I don't even know if that number is accurate, because some teachers are like, I don't know how many kids they teach, or like, I don't know. So we kind of just guesstimated for the most part on all of them. So that was really exciting to think about and do. Next slide. So COVID happened, and it kind of rocked me a little bit, where I was like, whoa, how do we teach STEM and Maker Ed online? But pre-COVID, we got involved with a large charter school network here in New York City to provide virtual 3D printer training. Now, if you know anything about a 3D printer, trying to do anything on a 3D printer remotely is crazy. So, but it worked out well for that school because they had schools and teachers all over New York City, and bringing them together for a 2-hour training was too much logistics. So they all hopped on a meet, and I did training with them like that. And it worked really great. They learned, they were super excited, they got their stuff up and working. And like every teacher had that like individualized kind of experience, because I was sitting there being like, oh, that noise doesn't sound good. What is it doing? And they'd like move their computer screen to show me, and I'd be like, oh, I'll fix that. Or, oh, you need to call someone because I don't know what's wrong with it anymore. So we did that. So that was a huge success pre-COVID. Then COVID happens, and I was like, we can still do this. We can still train teachers remotely on hands-on stuff. So what we started doing was we started sending out STEM kits to teachers. And what I believe is that if STEM and Maker Ed was important to your school before, it's still important to those kids. So trying to throw kids back into a school system where they just sit and do math and ELA in one seat all day without touching supplies is not going to work. It's not going to work for kids who are used to hands-on Maker Ed stuff. So we really need to think creatively about how we're going to make this work for our kids and how we're going to make this work for our teachers. So we started sending STEM kits or supply kits to teachers to do professional development remotely. So next slide, we can see some of our teachers. So we did an amazing, this is like the best PD I've ever done, with St. Raphael's School. It's a small Catholic school in South Jersey, but we spent 2 days, one day with leaders of the school, talking about what does STREAM mean to them and how we're gonna relate that to the community, to the teachers, and build capacity in our teachers to make this happen in all of our classes. And then the next day we did training with teachers where we did all of these awesome projects with pipe cleaners, and she got the balloon, I didn't send balloons, and electrical circuits, and all this stuff that's connected to the content that they traditionally teach in school. So the electricity thing is like redesign a book cover, and make it have an LED light in it. Now we're doing content knowledge, and we're doing electricity and Maker Ed stuff. So it's really powerful when our programs are focused on connecting Maker Ed to content and showing teachers you can do this in your class successfully and everyone's going to benefit for it. So we sent kits to teachers and we trained them, and that's what we've been doing all summer, and it's been really exciting. Next slide. So we also created an online hands-on course. So it's a 3-hour professional development course for teachers. It's called The Ultimate Guide to Teaching Maker Education, and it walks through one of our professional developments on how to be a Maker teacher. How do you plan a project? How do you connect it to your content? How do you teach the technology? How do you assess this? How do you give kids the opportunity to build? And the course walks teachers through that, and you can click again and something should pop up. So we're also offering a Maker kit to be sent to anyone who signs up for this course. So it's a hands-on course. So we need to make stuff, create stuff. While we're doing it, you can either collect all those supplies at your house, or we can send you a kit of stuff. And we have an awesome back to school sale going on where teachers can get that kit for free. And it's similar to the one in the last page. But teachers are loving it. They don't, you sit in all these online workshops and all these online things and you're just like, okay, I'm listening. But getting teachers to actually do things, the whole time we've been here, I've been playing with this pipe cleaner person. But getting teachers to engage and do things on the computer is exactly what we want to be doing right now when that seems really impossible. Another thing we did was we did some training on our Edison robots, our best friend, Edison. And we did a bunch of trainings with these remotely with teachers around New York State, which was an awesome experience. So that was really fun too. We did that remotely also. Okay, and then my favorite part of the summer, because it's been a busy summer. Next slide, please. So this summer, we partnered up with 3 Ducks Designs, which is a vendor who creates these connectors, these plastic connectors, and these cardboard pieces and kits to make stuff. This is my document cam. So I put my phone up here and I project anything below it. I use that with the robots. So we partnered with 3 Ducks, and we partnered with Urban Impact, which is a nonprofit organization that works in Bridgeport, Connecticut, that works specifically with one housing project. Dorothy, do you know them?
No, so I'm from Bridgeport, Connecticut, and I grew up in a housing project. So this is going to be awesome. I'm so excited to hear about this.
So they work specifically with one housing project there. They typically have mentors go into schools and pull kids out of class and work on things like reading and math and whatever the teacher said they needed help with, right? So Mia needs help with this phonics decoding thing. Can you do this work with her? And the mentors would work with them directly. So since the kids were now all virtual and faced with so many obstacles, we decided to implement this STEM project where we sent kits with mostly 3 Duck supplies and some other things like pipe cleaners and straws and brass fasteners. And I spent 8 weeks training mentors that would then go teach students a STEM project focused around simple machines. And then towards the end of that 8-week project, we hopped into designing and building something to help your community using the 3 Ducks. So the results, if you click one more time, we decided to measure results because it's possible and we did it. So we had a 37% increase in STEM skills in overall proficiency for our students. So overall, our kids, they increased their STEM skills, their STEM vocabulary, their ability to detect levers in the real world or pulleys in the real world by 37%. And we also assess, if you click again, we also assess essential skills, which to me means soft skills, but I don't believe in the word soft skills because nothing about being on time or being polite or being respectful is soft. That is essential to living your life. So our students increased their essential skills by 32%. So things like we focused on being curious, being creative, being able to reflect, be persevering. And we were able to assess those skills at the beginning and then again at the end, and saw this huge increase in scores. So on the next slide, there's a video from our virtual graduation. I don't really want to play the whole thing because it's 7 minutes, but if you can like fast forward to 1 minute, 24 seconds.
Sure.
And then there's like another part at the end.
Oops, sorry, that's not quite one.
Oh, these faces, I can't, they're so cute. Oh, we can't hear. So she's talking about, we can't hear her. So she's talking about how she used simple machines to make her tree house, and how the lever goes up and down on the tree house to get supplies and her into her tree house. So that's what she's talking about there. Okay, Stephanie, can you do me a huge favor? Can you
Sure.
reshare your screen, and on the bottom click share computer audio when you do?
Oh, sure. Just stop share and then reshare. Yeah.
Stop share, reshare, because the best part is coming up.
Let's see.
There's like a little checkbox on the bottom.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Sorry, got it. Okay. All right. This should work.
So then head to the end of the video.
Yeah, a lifting machine, right?
So now
And what is the name of it? The elevator, right? Yeah, okay.
So
then
with
So can
this
you,
design that you
Stephanie,
built,
head
what
to 6 minutes and
problem
54
will you find
seconds?
Sure.
Saving time, moving
Result.
messages.
He made a
Yeah.
mattress mover because he watched people move a mattress and it was painful for him to watch. That's what he said.
And what do you think you learned about yourself?
I'm very creative.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That you can see, you have a vision and you can build it. That is awesome. So
I want to be an engineer because engineers, they have they can do anything that they want that helps the community and that helps them do something better.
Does she melt your heart?
I always like these like student, and like I always think that like student voices are like the best advocates for like why maker education is so important. I'm like it doesn't matter like how many times as an adult you talk about why it's important. If you had one student share their experience, I feel like that's way more powerful than adults talking about it.
Totally. So, I mean, I didn't know that was happening. The mentor didn't know that was going to happen. She totally said that on her own. And like, we believe it. She's incredible, that little one. And I think we gave her a great opportunity to make her community better, which is what we're doing this for like, I think the kits were like $25 plus like a fee for like, you know, and the mentors were free. They were volunteers. So like, we literally hopefully changed this girl's life. So that's what we're super excited about. So on the next slide, I have a really cool new thing where you can text me and I can text you back, and it is like super cool. So send a text to that number. I'll drop it in the chat and you can all like join us on our WhyMaker family over here. So the other thing I want to share with you, we are on the next slide. We want to do this together. We're looking for more nonprofit organizations who typically work with children in person to replicate those results, to see if we can replicate those results. We know we can, but we're looking for, you know, Boys and Girls Clubs and Girl Scout groups and all sorts of different kinds of nonprofits out there that want to do something like like we did with the urban impact in Bridgeport. And we're looking to talk to school leaders about how we can do this with teachers and how we can do this with students, whether virtually, hybrid, or whatever situation they're in. We know we can do this together. So please reach out, get in touch. Otherwise, I'm just here for general support. Any teacher who needs to talk or needs help, you can text, you can email, whatever you want. I'm here.
Thanks so much, Liz, for all of the amazing work you're doing with educators and their communities, and also just like it's obvious that you've been very busy during the time period where we've all been sort of staying close to home during COVID. I'm going to transition. I know we are running a little behind, but because this is recorded, so if folks do need to hop off, completely understand. I do want to encourage, if folks have questions, to just, if you could drop them in the chat, and even if we don't get to address them in real time now, I'll make sure that we will follow up with you, in particular if it's a question for Liz or Dorothy, who will be speaking next. Please feel free to let us know and we'll make sure to follow up with you. So I'm going to turn it over to Dorothy. I think actually I figured out how to allow panelists. Sorry, Liz, I've now just figured out why it was disabled. Sorry about that. So I am going to let you be able to share your screen. Like I can do this now moving forward. Dorothy, I think you should be able to share your screen.
Okay, it's really hard to go after Liz because that was like amazing, and like I'm really personally touched. Like I said, that those kids are me when I was a kid, so it just really, like, I don't even have words right now. It's so amazing, and I'm so grateful for the work that you're doing. And I already privately messaged her that anything I can personally do to help her, I will be happy to, because it really speaks volumes to me. And I had a lot of really wonderful teachers along the way that saw promise, right? And I think sometimes if you're familiar with Bridgeport, Connecticut, it's a place where a lot of people don't necessarily see a lot of promise. So the work that you're doing, I know, is tremendous. And I have no doubt that that girl will become an engineer, and it'll be thanks to you. So thank you for that. Okay, so hopefully I'll go as fast as I can, Steph, here. Uh-oh, is it not? Oh, there it goes. Okay, so.
That's okay, take your time. It's recorded, so.
That's true, it is recorded.
People can tune in if they miss this part.
I do want to be sensitive. So I'm going to talk a little bit, I'm wearing my cap as an advisory board member, but also someone who really believes in Make for All and what Make for All stands for and does. So our organization, Nation of Makers, again, I'm the executive director of Nation of Makers. You know, we're really excited to work with Make for All and promote the work that they're doing. And so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how the work that we're doing around anti-racism, equity, and inclusion really is fitting into to what Make for All's commitment is overall, and how we're thinking about our commitment. And we're a little bit early on, I will say, in our own commitment making process. So there'll be some opportunities for you, hopefully, to join along with what we're doing as we sort of refine and make it more specific and tangible. Okay, so as you guys know, I mean, we are focused on education in this space, but the Maker movement really touches on so many different sectors. And that's important because beyond the education that we provide for these children, they will go on to pursue jobs in so many different areas. And we know that, you know, as Stephanie said, maker-centered learning allows for them to have the knowledge, not only the knowledge practically, but also the problem solving, what we might consider soft skills, but really aren't, you know, the presentation, the communication, the collaboration that comes out of maker-centered learning that can then be applied to all of these different areas of the world and all of these different sectors. And I won't go into all the specifics about how the Maker movement touches upon them, but needless to say, we know that there are outcomes in each of these different sectors that are influenced by the Maker movement and by makers and a maker-centered approach. And so what I want to talk to you a little bit about today is what I've been calling the 3D printed elephant in the room. And the reality is that when you look at data about the ethnicity of, for example, of Makerspace members, and I will give you a little context, this is a survey that Nation of Makers does every year. We're about to enter into our third year. It's the annual survey of makerspaces. Most of the respondents are community-based makerspaces, although we do have an increasing number of library and educational makerspaces makerspaces also responding, what you find is that makerspaces are not really diverse at all. And, you know, in some ways they recapitulate what you see in technology. They recapitulate some of the other sort of high-tech sectors that we see that there is a lack of diversity. And it's kind of something we know, but we don't really talk about a lot. And so one of the things that is a priority for our organization, Nation of Makers, is really to start the conversation and to continue the conversation about this. So that, you know, the elephant in the room is that makerspaces are currently not diverse. And you might say, okay, well, you know, we know that. Is that really a big deal? But I do want to put in the forefront of your mind that this year in 2020 is the first year that we've actually had majority minority children. So in the United States, we are finally at the place where no longer are minority children the minority. They're actually the majority in our country. And so when you think about the context of education and who's getting educated, and you look at our children in K-12, you see that most of the children are not then seeing people that look like them in maker spaces or in maker organizations. And that becomes problematic, right? So we go back to that beautiful video that Liz showed, and that little girl being very excited about it being an engineer, and then going somewhere and finding out that engineers don't look like me, and maybe getting conflicting responses internally. And some of us that have pursued you know, science and engineering careers, I myself have a PhD in neuroscience. You go to a conference and you're like, I thought I could do this because some people told me I did, but then when I get to the conference, I'm the only person that looks like me. And then there's some people that actually say some pretty awful things along the way that may also discount your feeling like you belong. And so that's why this is sort of a larger problem and something that in the context of even Make for All, you know, we want to draw attention to. And so the advisory board, you know, really supports that, you know, Make for All is really taking, you know, taking this approach of making sure that anti-racism and inclusion are part of their mission. And so the question is, how do we create anti-racist and inclusive maker environments? And really, I know some people might feel strongly about the word anti-racist. It might make you feel a little squirmy, right? We don't like to think about the word racism, but I think actually utilizing that term and saying it's not just inclusion, it's not just welcoming people to the table, but how can we actively combat systemic racism that's been happening that is creating those environments where children may not feel like they belong, where educators may not even feel like they belong, depending on the background, and where these horrific things that we hear about on the news that are becoming more and more, I wouldn't say common because they were happening, but maybe not reported upon, more and more reported come to the forefront. And how can you as an educator, how can we as educators or part of the education community create inclusive and anti-racist maker environments? And so that's really the challenge we asked ourselves, is like, when you look at environments of kids making, they're just having fun. I don't know that they're necessarily, this is a picture from Kid Museum, which is in Silver Spring, Maryland. And you could see, I mean, it doesn't seem like the kids are really focused on anything, but how do we, you know, make this whole, and how do we screw in, you know, this piece so that it can be fortified? And really that's, you know, we want to center, I know some people are like, we should focus on the making, and that's true. But in order to make everyone feel included, and in order for us to have an environment where kids can really thrive, we have to actually actively do that. And so the same here in this picture is also inclusion, not just by race. So I wanted to put this picture in because I wanted to remind us that when we're talking about inclusive and anti-racist environments, and obviously we're focusing on race with anti-racism, but inclusive is not just inclusive to racial differences or ethnic differences. It's also inclusive to different abilities, and inclusion of children that may have different abilities in the maker experience. And actually there's a lot to be gained here. And in this particular photo, this is from the Prototyping and Design Lab at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, Dr. Fouad Hamidi. And in his lab, he brings in a lot of youth who may have different challenges to kind of help the students at UMD co-design, the engineering students able to co-design with those students and develop strategies for them to learn. And so this is, for example, a a design where a child who's nonverbal is able to explain their emotions, right? So they have emotions. It's not that they don't have emotions, they're just having a problem verbalizing those emotions. Their neural circuitry is not allowing them to do that. And so this is another alternate way. And so the children are able to participate in that development. And so the maker experience is expanded beyond. And so that's also what we're trying to look at. Here we have students that are making squares. This is the Social Justice Sewing Academy in Oakland, California, really embedding social justice into the learning that we have, creating an environment where students are able to express their feelings about the current actions that are going on and actually make and create based on those feelings, those emotions, and then learning that happens about some issues that are not normally shared in, for example, our social studies classes. So our commitment overall, and this is not very specific and measurable, so Stephanie, I'm so sorry, we're going to fix that, is really to commit to creating an alliance of maker organizations to address this 3D printed elephant in the room, and really to create opportunities for dialogue, inclusive programming, and actionable next steps to create actively anti-racist and inclusive maker organizations. And I will tell you that this commitment is actually a Nation of Makers commitment beyond just education. It's sort of a larger commitment that we are in the process of trying to, you know, sort of narrow down and get a more specific action for education. And I will get into it towards the end. We are looking for partners for that kind of work. But here's what we're committing to. We're committing to say we will be intentional. We believe at Nation of Makers that inclusion is intentional and it must be central to your organization's vision, mission, and core principles. And so our vision is that we want to build a society where everyone has access to the tools, technologies, experiences, and knowledge to make anything. We want to create a thriving, connected, and inclusive community of practice where collaboration fosters a culture of abundance. And our mission really is to support the full range of organizations. Again, we're not just in education, but we do have a heart for education because we know that the students that come out of the educational environments that we provide will become the adults that continue to make and thrive and change our world. So we want to support the full range of organizations that impact makers through building of community, encouraging connections, broadly sharing resources, facilitating funding opportunities, engaging in policy development, and advocating for the maker movement. And we, over the last 3 years that we've only been an organization for a little over 3 years now. Actually, I guess it's getting close to 4. Time keeps going by. But our core principles, we really believe that as a nation of makers, we are stronger and more sustainable when everyone is welcome. And I won't go through all the categories, but really we're trying to create environments where everyone is welcome, where everyone is safe, supported, heard, encouraged, and respected, where everyone has access to the education and the resources needed to make, and where every maker respects the safety and well-being of the community. And those core principles, again, you know, even though this is larger sort of than just the educational environment, you can think about coming into a classroom, right? And, you know, I think most educators feel this way, right? They want to make sure that their classrooms are places where everyone is welcome, where everyone is safe, where everyone has access to the education that they deserve, and where every, you know, student and everybody who's in that classroom who is making and creating will respect the rest of their classroom and the rest of the educational environment. And so really, you know, we take these core principles to heart and say it's intentional that we implement them, that we actually have these conversations where we create environments that this occurs. So the second part is we will acknowledge systems of oppression and the legacy that they have created. I think it's really important that we take a step and we say, you know, we don't say that there are no systems of oppression, that children are not coming in with some baggage. And when we say baggage, it's not necessarily baggage that they've created, it's the baggage that the world around them has created. And as the adults, the responsible adults in the room, we do need to acknowledge that there is a failure that has happened and that there are some systems that are in play that may not even make sense, and we can all agree to that. But that they've created a legacy where some children have an opportunity to learn in a better environment than others. And some children have other things that may be happening to them or experiences they may have that differ from even other children, right? So I think it's really important that we acknowledge those things. We also want to continue to be data informed. So meaningful metrics will guide where we see we're at and where we measure our progress to be. I think Liz's work is a great example of this. Like, if you have the opportunity to measure something, measure it, right? We want to be informed in data And that data will tell us if we're actually making an impact. And I think one of the great things about this commitment model is that it is measurable, that it is actionable, intentional, and measurable, so that we know, are we making progress, and that we can push ourselves to make progress. And that progress doesn't have to be huge, right? So we saw that there was a disparity, for example, in makerspaces, and we're doing some work to try to change that. Well, even if we can change that by 1 percentage point in the opposite direction, where it's becoming 1 percentage point more, let's say, minority than majority white at a space or in an organization. Is that a success? Absolutely. We're just trying to move the needle. It doesn't all have to happen at once, but we need to at least measure our progress. And then we want to be action oriented. We want to walk the talk. I just heard this with somebody else and I told them I would borrow it. So here I am borrowing it. We want to walk the talk. We want to focus on actions for change, small and large. It's great to have conversations, but we want to move past the conversations to actions that are going to make a difference. And I think another great example of why commitments are so great is because they move you to action. You have to do something. So you're going to say you're going to do something and then you're going to do it. And that's really amazing. And so we want to be action oriented as well, but we will always be community centered. And so we really believe in community participatory research and community participatory design. So our community and its inclusive participation will lead our collective design of the future we want to have. So if we want to have an educational system that looks a particular way, we have to change it, not by ourselves and say, oh, that's what those people need, but with those people, if you want to call it that way, which is our community. And we need to start thinking about the collective versus just what our priorities are. So that's another reason to get some engaging partners that are already in your community. It's okay if you're not that person, if you're not the community partner, you don't have to do everything by yourself, but you do need to reach out to partners within your community that are already doing this work. And I think another great example, I'm going to keep touting Liz here, is that reaching out to organizations like Urban Impact that are already embedded in that particular community. Like Liz wasn't saying I'm an expert in Bridgeport, Connecticut, but she's like, hey, I can partner with this organization that is, and I'm going to work with their students, and they're going to give me some information that might help guide how I do this in the context of understanding where those kids are at in that particular housing project, right? So we really lead with our community. This is a picture from our Nation of Makers annual conference, NAMCON, where really we came together as a community and really took, status of where we were at and continue the conversation. So every year we visit that conference and continue to do that work. And so the question that I leave for you is, will you join us? So we really could use some engaging partners, and there's lots of different ways that you can join us. And these are just some of the ideas that we've come up with, but if you have other ideas around creating a more inclusive and anti-racist maker community in education, we're happy to have you on board. We have partners at Fab Foundation, Maker Ed, Make Community, Citizen Schools, I'm trying to think all of the people. I feel like I've missed somebody, Steph, but it might be Digital Promise. Like we have a number of different community partners that are working with us on this work, and we continue to keep growing that group. One of the things that we've done is we've made our core principles. They're not just for our organization to sign. We want them to go out. So if you go to our website, you can go to our core principles, you can actually print out a poster, or you can request a poster and we'll send one to you to put up in your classroom, to put up in your makerspace, to put up in your organization that just says, this is what I believe. And I believe, in doing that, you're expressing to your students, to your educators, to your administrators, what you personally believe, which is that everyone has the right to this access and equity, and everyone belongs and everyone should be heard. We're also asking people to educate yourself in your community. And so we started discussing what anti-racist maker book club would look like and what some of the book club suggestions are. And we've been getting some really interesting book club suggestions. And we're asking people to please, one thing you could commit to do is to lead your own book club. You can say, we're going to lead a book club with this many schools. We're going to get together and have a dialogue about the books that we've read, about the specific context to the maker community, to maker education. You could join our podcast. We're working on a podcast that would actually be more dynamic. We would love to have educator voices, student voices on it. It's not just going to be education, but certainly we want people with the lens of education to join us. You can also start a conversation. Now, we said we want to walk the talk, but you have to start somewhere, and talking is great. So hosting a town hall or community dialogue, you could commit to saying, I'm going to get my school system to have a dialogue about how we can make more inclusive maker organizations, or how we can make more inclusive maker spaces in our school, or how we can increase the number of kids that are from a particular group that join our makerspace. One thing we found a lot of times, at least in certain counties that I've talked to, maker education sometimes lives in career and technical education. And unfortunately in our country, for some reason, career and technical education is seen as a negative, which I don't really understand, but there's a legacy to that. And so it's thought of as the place you go when things are not working for you, which I guess is good because you'll get a really awesome job after that. But it is problematic that things like robotics or what we consider high-tech making live in one place and low-tech making live in another place. And so it might be a great conversation to have that dialogue of, how do we bridge the gap there? So that's an example of something that can happen. And I know in a few of the places that I've talked to, they're starting that conversation like, well, why is that the case? And it turns out structurally, some of it is students, like classes are made so that only certain students that are supposedly sort of tracked in one track get to go to one place. And so the other classes are not offered at the time that they can go to. And so it actually reinforces, again, systemic inequality, right? So how are we going to fix that? Well, we're going to have a conversation, and then we're going to do something like change the schedule. And then the last thing is, we're really talking about how we can move to action. So it's great to have community dialogues to really talk about the problem, but really we're trying to create a series of actionable conversations about how to be an anti-racist maker organization. And so that, again, can also be something that can be implemented at the school level. And we are encouraging people to either join or host a facilitated Black, Indigenous, or person of color led actionable conversation where you have somebody from the community that you're trying to reach to, that you're compensating them, you're bringing them in as an expert, and that they're helping you to design, again, that community co-design, and that you're engaging people from those different groups in your community. So you're not just bringing outsiders in, but that you're speaking to the people within your community to actually engage in a planning process to make implementable, sort of strategies. And so this is the work that we're doing as Nation of Makers, again, at the highest level. We would love to have people's engagement and kind of continuing on. Here's my personal information and all the ways that you can follow us and reach out to us. But I would love to hear from you if you're interested in participating. Over the next few weeks, we're refining our commitment for Make for All specifically to education. And we would love to have educators engaged in the conversation with us. And if you have something that you're trying to do and you would love to have us as sort of a national organization kind of help you with it, we're happy to also help you with your commitment as well. We're just, excited to have this work move forward. So that's all I have. Hopefully, I kept us too long, 20 minutes over. So sorry about that, Steph.
That's okay. Thank you so much, Dorothy, for sharing your commitment and work with us, and also just providing more background information on the work that you're doing around anti-racism, equity, and inclusion, and for inviting others to join and participate in the work that you're doing. And also a thank you for being such a dedicated advisory council member for the past couple of years. I want to wrap things up here because I know we are over time. I did want to highlight that in terms of next steps, would love for folks who are interested to actually have the opportunity to submit their commitment ideas through our form. I've got that here, and then to also highlight that we're going to be doing 2 Make for All office hours on August 25th and September 1st. I'll send out links for folks to sign up for those, and that's for just workshopping your commitment ideas with our team and getting to connect with other potential commitment makers. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up here. Big thank you to Liz and Dorothy again for joining us as featured speakers, and looking forward to hearing about your commitment ideas soon. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you, Stephanie. Bye.
Bye.